Hey, yo, 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 it's the ugly truck driver. How the flock are you? Well, I got another question from a subscriber. I'm going to try and answer it the best way I know how. Um, I don't have all the answers, okay? As you know, I'm conservative. I'm pro-life, pro-God, pro-God, mom, apple pie, and all that goes with it. And yet, in my wild and crazy times, I have been so far out there that people might question a lot of the things I say, believe, do, have done, or at least been accused of. But the man asked a question, and it relates back to my military service. Now, there have been a few people on several different websites here, and I've been online since 1997, that have questioned my actual military service, questioned whether or not I was even a vet, whether I was even in combat, whether I was even in Vietnam, and a couple of them offline. I've shown them copies of my medals, my DD-214, and all the rest of that good stuff, and yet people still question me. Well, let's start out with this, okay? This is my main premise in life. Yes, I was in the military. Yes, I was in Vietnam. Yes, I saw limited combat. Yes, I had the crap scared out of me more than once. And I saw a couple of friends die in combat in Vietnam. But see, when it comes to my life, what a lot of people don't get, I was a military brat. Now, unless you have been a military brat, grown up in that kind of family, in that kind of setting, you may never get this. But to another military brat who hears what I've got to say, they'll sit there and say, oh, hell yeah, I've been there. I've seen that. I've done that. My military life started when I was 2 years old. At the end of World War II, my father, who was a fighter pilot in Europe that used to escort bombers over the sea, over France and into Germany in his fighter plane, saw combat, used to fly up and down the English Channel in what's the equivalent of a Piper Cub today, with a radio listening for German communications from Switzerland, from Poland, from wherever else you want. Freezing cold nights, come back almost numb. And then the next day he would climb into a P-47, later on a P-51D. Also flew a P-38 with a camera in the nose of it to try and get pictures of Normandy and all the rest of that. Yeah. Well, in 1948, the end of the Second World War, MacArthur was in charge of the occupation of Japan at the end of World War II after we dropped the atomic bombs on Japan. My dad was transferred over there. My mother and I were later shipped to Japan as dependents between 1948 and 1950. We lived on Honshu or Hokkaido, both northern and southern islands. Dad was a fighter pilot. Back then, their mission in Japan from 48 to 50 was to fly up and down the Japanese Sea to test the Russians' radar and responsibilities at the end of World War II. There were a lot of pilots that did that. There were a lot of pilots that didn't come back. This was back when we first started getting the new jets back then. I think they were, the hell they call them, P-80s, I believe. Not quite sure. P-38 or F-38s, I'm not sure. I mean, I was like 2 years old. Pictures I had of me over in Japan, sitting on the wing of my father's fighter plane, have long since disappeared after my mother married another man after a divorce and demanded she get rid of all these old photos because it offended his sensibilities. Well, fuck you, Emery Wright. You destroyed part of my family history. But nonetheless, from 48 to 50, we lived in Japan. My father flew up and down the Japanese Sea. We've seen a lot of guys in the early jets that used to get flame outs and auger in. Never came back. I can vaguely remember the food riots in Japan because the Japanese people didn't have enough to eat and used to come out to the front gate of the military bases because we were fat Americans and had food and water and booze and all the rest of that good crap. And these people were sitting there looking for a bowl of rice. And they would riot at the front gates. That's the start of my military career at the age of 2. I can go on later on, after my parents got divorced. I joined the Naval Sea Cadets in Camden, New Jersey, me and Alan Ritchie. We participated weekly, just like seagoing Boy Scouts. We even got to go on 1 or 2 cruises on old destroyers running up and down the East Coast, sleeping overnight on the weekends. We were good troopers. We even took judo and hand-to-hand combat back then. And for a couple of years, until lifestyle changes happened, and Alan Ritchie were pretty tight friends. Then about 1963, long after my parents had divorced, I got the opportunity to spend a year in Germany with my father and his new wife, Helga, who was a German citizen. Spent a year over there in Munich, in the Rammersdorf section of Munich. Used to go down to Wilkesern. Used to watch the GI Life over there. Played many games of pinochle. Got drunk as a skunk. A bunch of other stuff. There ain't nothing like running through the middle of Munich during Oktoberfest in a Volkswagen, being 17 years old, drunk out of your mind, and the guy that's driving the VW is a staff sergeant, blown out of his gourd on rum and coke or cognac and coke. Been there, done that. Don't want to go back. Why we didn't live past that, I got no idea. But who would know, from 1963 to 1967 that I would join the Army, go through Wheel Vehicle School at Fort Dix, Armored Tank School at Fort Knox, go to Korea for a little while, up on the Frozen Chosen on the DMZ, end up in Vietnam. And what should happen? My father and his military unit got shipped to Vietnam at the same time I was there. Surprise! 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 The only reason I know that he was in country at that time was, I'm going to say about the end of June or maybe early July, paychecks came out. I get a paycheck for William Brockner, Sergeant First Class. Hello, I'm a fucking slick sleeve private. Went back to the paymaster and said, "This is not mine. This is my dad's. Where the hell is he?" That's how I found out my dad was in Vietnam the same time I was. He was an operations sergeant for a chopper evac unit for a hospital over there. And we found out where each other was. We met up, got a couple days leave, palled around together, told all kinds of war stories, got drunk, did stupid shit, father and son. But eventually, I told Pop, I says, look, World War II was your thing. And trust me, my dad, I don't have it anymore, but I once had it, had a chest full of medals, okay? Including a Purple Heart. He got shot in the ass in a fighter plane in a mission. What happened was a bullet went underneath the seat, hit that little charge that ejects you, and the shrapnel went up and smacked him in the ass. My father's going to hate me for this, but it's the truth. But he got a Purple Heart for it. He was in combat. He was shooting down German fighters. But here in Vietnam, we were palling around, goofing off. And I told Dad, I says, Dad, with your background, your experience, prior experience in the military, you should go home. Go home to Helga. He said, well, we'll take care of it. At the time, I was in 2 track armor units in Vietnam. First one was 9th Infantry Division, second and 47th Mech Infantry. We were out there outside of Benoit, Saigon, out going towards the Cambodian border, out in the plantations looking for Charlie. Later, I was transferred to the 199th Light Infantry Brigade, D Troop 17th Cav. I was a track mechanic. I'm no freaking hero. I was a 20-year-old kid, half the time scared out of his mind. I carried an M16 in one hand, a tool bag in the other to fix the tracks. And when the shit hit the fan, I was OJT'd on the 50 caliber, the M60, M79 grenade launcher, carried a 45 caliber grease gun at one time or another, learned to play with C4, learned to play with Claymore mines. Trust me, I learned a lot when I was over there. But anyhow, after I talked to Dad, we went back to our separate units. A couple months later, I get orders. I'm being shipped out of Vietnam. I've been there only 6 months. So this is like right around November 67. Now, supposedly, I was supposed to get shipped back to Conus. That's the United States. Because they don't want to have 2 family members in a combat zone at the same time. Military regs. What happens to me? I get shipped right back to freaking Korea where I left. And I spent the balance of my time in Korea. Worked on a transportation supply agency. Used to run up and down the DMZ with trucks. I ended up as what they call the MTPO, Motor Transportation Officer for the 7th Infantry Division. Unfortunately, I was the only person in that section because their TO&E list was short of officers and personnel. And for over a year and a quarter, I was it. I used to fight with generals every fucking day. I need 5 deuce and a half. Well, I only got 3. Take it or suck ass, Trust me. I fought with 2 and 3 star generals, colonels, lieutenant colonels, even down to company level sergeants that wanted transportation. It was my job to supply backup, and if I couldn't get the backup, then I had to go down to Wee John Boo, 8th Army, and get backup from there to supply their needs. I did a lot of crap on the phone, a lot of typing orders. And my job, and at that time I was a Spec 5 E5 sergeant, was supposed to be held by a major. I know the military. I left Korea just before Christmas of '68. I'd fallen in love with a Korean woman. I'd married her. She got pregnant. We'd filed papers to get married. The military wouldn't recognize the marriage. She got sick. She bled to death pregnant with our child from a duodenal ulcer. I have yet to quite forgive the Army because that was their opinion back then, that they didn't want GIs hooked up with civilians. But that in itself is another story I'm not going to go into here. I got out of the military, came back to the United States, went through a bunch of different jobs. I ended up, after separation and repatriation with my first wife, working for the New Jersey Air National Guard. My initial assignment was down at NAFAC in Atlantic City. We had a fighter group down there called I forget the name now, but there was F-106s. I was ground power. We used to drag ground generators out to the jets and fix the ground power and all that, refuel them and stuff like that. And I was working nights. I didn't like it. I just totally sucked. So I got a chance to transfer up to McGuire to the 177th Mobility Support Flight, which was part of the 108th Attack Group there at McGuire, which had F-4s. We had Caribous, and we were like support flight. Worked in a motor pool up there that, took care of all the vehicles that serviced the flight line. It was a pretty decent job. And unfortunately, my head got bigger than my wallet at the time. I ended up leaving there, and I should have never, looking back, because it was a damn fine job. And I went trailer trucking professionally, even though I'd been driving trucks since 1966 in the military. I turned professional right around 1974. But went through divorce and all the rest of that insanity. After the divorce of my second wife, I ended up hooking up with the Philadelphia Navy shipyard. I ended up working in their transportation department as a civilian employee, providing services on base, anywhere from driving buses to transport the troops to and from the shipyard, driving the taxis, doing escort duty, you name it, even to the point of taking like a steak body 3/4 ton filled up with valves and other supplies and running them down to Virginia Beach, down to the Navy Yard down there and back. But yeah, I guess you could sit there and say I have been in the military or associated with the military since 1948. Now, some people say from Vietnam and this and that, and a couple of my Vietnam buddies, oh, you got PTSD, you should file a claim and all this, you're crazy, you're out of your fucking mind, you smoke too much, you drink too much, da 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 da. Well, I went and started that. I got about a month into it and I saw what they wanted. And then I saw where people that are classified with PTSD, the government and the Second Amendment rights are being restricted because GIs that are classified PTSD, they think they're crazy and they're going to go out and shoot somebody. Have you ever noticed most of the school shooters, the crazies, blowing up movie houses and stuff? They're all either Muslims, socialists, or Democrats. Go look it up on the internet. I'm not crazy. I'm a realist. You know me, I'm a realist. I see it for what it is. I pick on both sides. But when it comes to, Daddy, what did you do in the war? My kids ever asked. A couple of my kids have asked, Dad, did you kill anybody? I can honestly say I never sat there point blank and blew somebody away. I was in firefights. I was in ambush patrols. And after the end of it, and it got all cleaned up, all we saw was blood trails. Because that's the way it was in Vietnam. They would not leave dead bodies around for us to identify if possible. I took enough hand-to-hand combat, enough karate and taekwondo when I was in Korea. Of course, now I'm old and ugly. But I could be a real ass kicker in my younger days if I wanted to be. But even to this day, I've forgotten a lot, but there's a few things that kick in automatically when you're put in the corner. You'd have a little problem taking me down, trust me. But my military experience, we'll just politely say, goes from 1948 for better than 30 odd years. And no, I'm not qualified for a retirement income from the military, even though I should be. I've seen shit as a dependent. I've seen shit as an active duty military person. I know stuff. I was a battalion commander's driver for half a year in Korea for Bill Huggins. I've been in secret meetings concerning North Korea back then, in case if Joe Chink ever jumps the line of what we're supposed to do, and I'm not permitted to talk about it. I've seen a few other things here and there. I'm a vet. That's all I am. I'm a vet longer than many other vets, even though I wasn't a commissioned officer or enlisted man. I'm a vet. Like all vets, when we took the oath, just because I'm no longer in the military doesn't mean I've given up that oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Did I do it all right? No. But being a firm believer in God, Jesus Christ, our country, our family, I'm a vet. And if ever asked, I will stand and fight again. Because I'm a military brat that grew up in the military and knows what the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Bill of Rights really means. And as of January 10th, 2014, there's a bunch of idiots in Washington, D.C. that have sold America down the toilet for personal gain. Y'all need to wake up. This is what I did in the military. What have you done lately? Truck driver's opinion, you understand.